and engagement, which, thanks, Craig. Just click the got it. So depth perception and engagement. So really lucky to have David here. And apart from that, also with 25 years of group facilitation, David is a seasoned professional when it comes to that. So lots of stuff to share. And he's going to be taking us through some really practical exercises and his framework, which I'm really looking forward to. So if we can give a warm welcome to David, and I will hand over to you.
Righty, so I'll just share my screen. And hopefully now, what everyone is seeing is a plain old slide. Okay, so this is all about group process, group facilitation, group process, and a journey that the people can take from accidental facilitators to intentional facilitators. And the notion of, facilitation has been sometimes called the art of making visible the invisible. So hence the framing around depth dive. Alrighty. So equally, you might call it over the horizon radar, but that kind of making visible the invisible. So before we go any further, I'd just like to acknowledge the First Nations people of this country. Well, all of us around Australia live and work somewhere on Indigenous land. And so I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of those lands, past, present, and emerging. Okay, so one thing I want people to do is to use the chat function as we go through. And if you can kind of please type into the chat, firstly, just your name, whatever name you care to use tonight, and one weird trick, one weird facilitation trick in Agile that you've come across or that you've seen other people use. So just take a minute now and to populate the chat function, please. Autumn. That sounds weird, doesn't it? Yes. Other people, one weird trick. Do
you put an explanation in as well, or just the name?
Just the name, and we'll come back to this. Open space, cool.
Got to admit, you really make me think on that one.
All righty.
It's easier when people are actually interacting, I think, with it. I do party tricks.
Okay, well, I'll stick that in. Party tricks, that's a good one. Young thinking as well.
No one's putting in dad jokes.
You've turned us all off it, Craig. John, sorry. All righty. So I'll just people can continue to put stuff in if something in there comes out for you. But so at this point in time, we're really into a kind of checking in and overview process. And so, checking in is really one way of, people starting to come together as a group, because for a group to do its best work, you've got to, it's got to be a measure of trust, a measure of respect, a measure of, you knowing where people are coming from, and so on. So, that kind of checking in provides that kind of group formation, if you will. So this webinar, well, it's really about the underlying dynamics of facilitation, a framework of that, or dynamics for short. And as you can see, so this webinar has 5 phases. So we're currently in part 1, about to check in an overview. Then we'll kind of launch into, I'll do a quick rundown, a walkthrough on the dynamics of facilitation. Then we'll look at how to use them, why they're important, and then we'll conclude with a summary and checking out. Without further ado, let's get into the overall meat of the session. So towards better group process, from bits and pieces, all those individual tips and tricks and tools and stuff. Kahoot quizzes, thanks. So from individual bits and pieces to an overall robust framework that really allows you both to kind of think ahead about what you're going to do, to actually implement that responsively, and then to debrief your structure afterwards. So hence from and to. Okay, so let's get into the what, the introduction, and part 3 we'll look at the thing. So what you can see on your screen at the moment is the set of dynamics in flow. So you've got an opening phase, you can see that for yourself, a divergence, emergence, convergence, and a closing phase. So the opening is really what we've already spent time doing, welcoming, process, timing, introducing the topic. Divergence is people often use brainstorming as their measure of divergence. And best if that's at least adjacent, the topic of that is adjacent to the topic at hand. Okay, so I'm honored to use Brisbane lean coffee as a quick example here. So it's got a really regular structure that it uses every time people rock up, and it's for me as a facilitator, I found that very handy because it enables me to be part of the group, even as a complete newbie. So what do I do? Well, there's someone, often there's 1 or 2 tables. So there's someone at a table who says, well, welcome, has new people introduce themselves, and actually walks through what is going to happen for that hour that Brisbane Lean Coffee meets. Okay. Then there's the classic, we've all got little sticky notes, and we'll brainstorm questions or ideas or issues or just something that we'd like to talk about. We brainstorm those, they all go onto the sticky notes. And then the third phase is, well, there's the Kanban about, there's a brainstorm list, then there's what we're going to talk about, and then there's finished discussion, that's the 3 columns. So, part of that emergence is putting all of those brainstorm items onto the Kanban list. Then there's a voting. So kind of getting some structure around those items. They use as democracy. So people just putting their little dots on it. And then the discussion happens in vote order. So whatever gets the most votes gets in. So then convergence, as each topic comes up and people kind of work into it, there's, oh yeah, we're finished with that, or there's a vote sometimes to say, well, we might continue. Yeah. Okay. And so then you've gone from this wide range of topics to, here's some stuff that emerges out of that into, here's some conclusions or some learnings. And then it's closing is really simple in this case. It's saying, thanks and see you next month. So a well-known process that is used, but for me, it's a reasonable example of the dynamics in action. Okay, so let's go through these in a bit more detail. So opening. So you can see the spiral there on your screen. And so opening is really around transitioning into the session. It's saying, and of course, usually the spiral starts well before the session itself starts, well before, if you're in a room where you say, stand up and say, g'day everyone, the spiral starts well before then. And so often there's, an agenda circulated, or there's minutes from the previous sessions, or there's work done that gets it going beforehand. And then it really is about, as we said before, about bringing the whole group together and getting everyone on the same page. And of course, as I said before, with new groups, there's always usually a trust building element. And one of the handy phrases there is called connection before content. So opening, so getting people onto the same page all together. So second dynamic. People having dinner is probably our place as well, so I can't mute. So the second dynamic is divergence. And well, people often default to brainstorming. And yeah, it's a good tool. And of course, there are dozens of ways to do brainstorming in all different formats. But sort of the essence is creating a whole range of information for processing. And one of my favorite phrases here is, well, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. I don't know if people have heard that one before. I'm going to say it one more time just because it's a bit interesting. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And so, if your session is going to go somewhere, if it's actually going to achieve anything constructive, meaningful, useful, there's going to be some element of new thinking. New thinking requires new information as a foundation, data to be processed, and enabling and harnessing diversity is really critical here in terms of getting useful divergent basis of stuff. I won't read the slides because they'll be available afterwards, and you can read them yourself as I'm talking anyway.
You're doing very well, Hannah.
Okay, third dynamic is emergence. And people may have heard about Sam Kahner's diamond facilitation. So Kahner talks about the divergence, he talks about the convergence, and then often though there's this phase in the middle around emergence, and Sam Kahner calls this the groan zone, where it's like you've done the easy part of brainstorming, and you're not yet into kind of jumping to action. You're saying, well, what does it mean? What goes with it? How does it fit together? And so this is the hard work of facilitation. And using the iceberg metaphor, it's like herding icebergs. If you're herding cats, well, anyone can herd cats, but herding icebergs is a little more tricky as you go. So why is this important for facilitation? Okay. So most people can do all the other stuff pretty well. People know about, for group formation, and they know about, about having some good conclusions written up. They know about brainstorming, know about making conclusions. Where you earn your money as a facilitator is actually helping people, persevere productively in order to actually get below the waterline for stuff that will make a difference in the longer term. If facilitation is about building agreement, about working towards enough of an agreement that people can live with it afterwards, then you have to do this part of the work here. Otherwise, you may as well not bother, or have to live with short-term results. Okay, fourth dynamic is convergence. I already mentioned this in passing. So if emergence is about starting to make sense of things, convergence is about making meaning of stuff. So it's about what's significant, what are the priorities, what are the key learnings, what are the real root causes, plural usually. Once you kind of start to, especially with root causes, once you get those really nailed down, then they start to move into action. So they're like windows of opportunity. So the convergence is where the rubber really starts to hit the road. I'm just going to sort of do this at a real gallop, and then there'll be a chance for people to kind of work into it a bit as we go. Okay, so, and finally there's closing. So this is the transition out of the session. So that's why I just used the same spiral, but reversed. And so transition in at one end, transition out at the other end. And it's where you are, where you really articulate what you've achieved. Articulate, document what you've achieved. What are the next steps? That type of thing. So, Okay, so those are the 5. So opening, divergence, emergence, convergence, and closing. Each one of them, every one of them is necessary. None of them are sufficient in isolation. And just to belabor the obvious, by repeating my little swoopy orange line, this webinar itself is structured using the same dynamics. So you can use it for participatory sessions, you can use it for presentations, you can use it for even a 2-minute conversation, a whole raft of a multitude of uses as you go. Okay, Craig, I'm about to throw to the small groups in a minute or two, just to give you a heads up. Okay. So, great facilitation. Well, it's more than just standing up, physically or figuratively in front of a group and running a process. We all know it doesn't happen by by accident. Neither does it happen just because you've got a routine or a habit around it. It does require appropriate forethought and action. And what's helpful to approach this is to say, well, every piece of facilitation is a task in its own right, especially if you're talking about project facilitation. And so, again, you have to think about, well, why do it? What's the point of it? The discovery phase. What's your plan? Then you've got to actually run it, so delivering, and then usually some kind of lessons learned or debrief, especially if you're wanting to learn and get better at that kind of whole process. Okay, so that's enough of a brain dump from me. The idea from here is that we'll have a 7-minute piece of small group work. 7 minutes, nice round number. And your task is pretty basic. So what I want people to do is to, actually over here, is to firstly brainstorm other examples. So I've given a few. Brainstorm other examples of each dynamic. Oh, I can't copy from the session. Damn. Okay, so to brainstorm other examples of each dynamic, and then to, just, maybe only 1 or 2. And then to create in your small group a playful sequence. So just put them together in different ways, and if one comes out that seems fun, then create your playful sequence. So 7 minutes to do that. You can see holding up 5 fingers, 7 minutes. And then we'll get you to report back out to the whole group.
So David, is it a kind of a role play thing, or is it or when we report back the sequence, is it sort of one person running through the sequence that we'd come up with?
One person on behalf of the group, yeah. So get them to report back, some of their examples, and if another group has already reported one of yours, don't bother repeating, and then let's make a sequence. So off we go.
I think we were all muted.
We were.
So what I'll ask people to do, if you feel comfortable, is to put some of the stuff while we go, put some of the ideas that you had, put those into the whole group chat. And that might, as part of the recording, that will be useful for people. But if we can have just one person from each group, just give a couple of the examples that they came up with and reconstruct their sequence. Perhaps we start with group 3. Who is that?
Who was in group 3?
I think that's me, is it?
I think it is.
Oh,
Thanks,
well
Dee.
done. So we talked about starting off perhaps with a scavenger hunt. So perhaps having people before the session have some research to do on the topic to bring in and share, or even doing an interview with somebody that they know that knew a lot about the topic to share with the group. We talked about using a lean coffee as part of a kind of divergent practice to gain ideas. We also talked about them using, and I can't remember the other one now. What was it? A mind map. That's it. Thank you. Mind mapping as well. And then we talked about perhaps using improv and having participants do playbacks to consolidate what they'd learned and teach back to the group to consolidate their learning to close out.
Cool. Thanks, Dee. Someone from group 1.
I think that's probably our group. So we had Kerry as our
We're on group
spokesperson.
2, weren't we?
Are we 2? Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure what the room numbers were.
Yeah, John,
Unfortunately,
Gary, you were room
unfortunately, group 1, no one was participating. They all blanked out.
Well, we only fared slightly better, in honesty. So I do apologise in advance if we've got this totally out of the ball court, well and truly out over those bleachers, to be honest with you. I don't think we did very well, do we? What do you think, guys? Did we do well?
Yeah, I think we did reasonably. So we looked at the facilitation, one of the facilitation patterns that you've used in the past.
So because I do this training on a very regular basis, I have a set pattern because a lot of the times I'm actually teaching people that don't know each other. So my opening every single time is that introduction of the individuals to each other, and they have to tell me why they are here. What is the point of them being here? What are their objectives from the course? So it's not about the course's objectives, it's about their objectives.
Yep.
And I get them to put it down as SMART goals. So they're actually benchmarking towards the end of the week. And, and then we go on to talk about the structure of what we're doing throughout the days during the week as well. So we're getting that clarity on the expectations and setting the direction for where we need to go. When we got to convergence and close, then I fell about with laughter because I used to actually let people know about their exams at the start of the week. But what I found was people were fixating on those exams, and these exams are actually quite hard. So now I save it up for the very last day and, right at the end of the day. And of course, this week's group, they literally just fell to pieces. That's why I started laughing. So I just had this vision of their faces when they clapped eyes on the sample paper. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that was me falling about with laughter. Yeah, so that was my take on this. And, to be honest with you, I use a lot of different tools during my training courses, everything from flip charts, mind mapping. I've got a product box underneath my desk. Lego. I can't get enough of Lego. I'm telling people now, don't throw the stuff out, because it'll knock you back nearly $1,000 to buy the stuff from Lego themselves for Lego series plates. Hugely expensive. You know, there's lots of things that people throw out as kids. We're throwing away the kids' stuff. It's like, no, keep it. You want that stuff for your workshops, you know, to get people more interactive. So that's really my story play. I try not to bore people while I'm teaching.
Play is incredibly important. And one of the things around participation is that you know, the story part, it's enabling people to both create and take control of their own narrative, you know, to create stories for themselves, to create stories together. If you can do it with play, that actually helps people relax into it. Brilliant, way to go. I'm sure you've got good tips for me, so I'll be looking to talk with you some more. So what I thought I heard KJ say was that there wasn't much happening in group 2, so with their permission that we might, or group 1, we might just keep moving. So I'll share my screen again. Okay, so here we are. Sorry. Done that one, we've done that. So this part is kind of like, well, how do we use these dynamics? Let's get Zoom to play nicely for me. So the small group process you just went through was a small use of the how. So, you know, if each of the dynamics I gave a gallop through the what, you know, what each part is about, then you have small examples about how you implement them. For this next part, I want to walk through 3 different threads that then travel across the dynamics. So the first one is around, you know, unhelpful participant behavior, an example of that. And you know, participant behavior is a good diagnostic around how the group is traveling, for better or for worse. The second thread is a trap, something to avoid as a facilitator. And then the third thread is, well, you know, a way that you can intervene or help refocus the group. Okay, so again, you know, this is around the delivery phase. So figuring out what's going on in real time while you're in the trenches, or, you know, in the thick of the action, and saying, oh, okay, so this is what I planned. This is actually what's happening. What might I be able to do about it? What can I do? So hopefully this will help you with your delivery stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to go through again each dynamic in turn. So opening, you know, generally, you know, things that go wrong here are people get bogged down, or they veer off topic. And this is the veering off topic is, of course, not just at the opening. It can happen at any time. There's a bit of a bugger when it happens. So, you know, when this happens, your role as a facilitator is to help the group actually obviously get back on track. And so in my experience, and other people may have a different experience or extra experience, but in my experience, the clearest, fastest, easiest way to refocus a group is to kind of to refocus on the topic. So your intervention, if you will, is topic based. And again, it's often around saying, hang on, folks, you know, we're going off in this direction, but actually, you know, what we've agreed to talk about is actually over here. This is a topic we need to be on at the moment. And sometimes, you know, an alternative is say, well, that's really, really interesting, Fred. Now, just remind me how that relates to the topic. And if you put it as a question, you do leave open the option for Fred to explain himself. Because every so often they go off and the topic, the connection is clear in their head and opaque to everyone else. When they explain the connection, people go, oh, okay, of course. Or they can say, no, and so on. But So restating the topic or giving people a chance to say why what they're saying is connected to the topic and how that works. Okay. Divergence. So one of the classic things here is people go, oh, we need more data, we need more data. And of course, sometimes that's just an avoidance tactic, as is the kind of, well, we know enough, just get on with it. Both of those, excessive hunting for data or avoiding the data, they're both avoidance tactics. So your role is basically to ask, clear, simple, open-ended questions that actually achieve the, your outcome in terms of getting a good base of information and awareness. And so then, at different points along the way, often during convergence, it becomes clear that, oh, hang on, there's something we've missed. There's a gap in the data. And so then, during that type of thing, divergence, emergence, convergence, your role is, again, in focusing is fact-based. So ask data-driven questions that help people really kind of build that base of information, that base of awareness. Help them figure out how to fix that gap. Emergence. So project managers and engineers and all, they're often really interesting people. And there's this complete avoidance of anything that might be remotely construed as touchy-feely. And fair enough, because touchy-feely is not much use to anyone, because it also fails to deal effectively with the powerful use of emotion. Emotions are in fact critical to getting in a powerful agreement or a really well-structured commitment that people will actually deliver on. If you avoid the emotion, you have an intellectually bright idea, but you don't have any guts behind it. So you've got to do the emotion. But we all acknowledge it's a tricky balance. Equally, getting cranky, wallowing in being cranky is of no use to anyone either. So one of the things that people talked about before was building connection. Young was talking in our small group about building connections and stuff. And so one way to kind of address the kind of issues around the lack of focus here or the diagnostic here is to re-establish or to refocus the connections. Ask questions. So you're looking at these two items here. What is the connection that you see? You've talked about this as a group. What other associations, memories or other associations? What are the values here? Why is, what's important about this, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of that last one starts to move you towards the convergence. But a lot of this is around a pattern interrupt. So by focusing on connection and having people work into that and kind of explore that purposefully, then you're interrupting unhelpful patterns and helping people work through that below the waterline stuff. It can be really tricky. That's why I talked before about, or mentioned herding icebergs, that style of thing. Okay, convergence. So the classic trap here, the classic unhelpful behavior is people they want to spend a long time, paralysis by analysis. Part of your issue as facilitator, you say, well, okay, I just want to help people kind of get on with it. And you substitute their thinking for your thinking. Sorry, you substitute your thinking. So, you try to do the group's thinking for it. You have you might have something that you think, well, what about this? What about this? And that's a trap. And rather, help the group explore the meaning for themselves. Ask questions. And everyone knows about the 5 whys, and it's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. It works, and it's a really powerful tool for convergence. Okay, and then the closing. We've all met people in our life who, they're the people who want to kind of jump to the action. They're the people who know what's going on, or they think they know what's going on, or they think that they know better than anyone else, and they're impatient with what they perceive to be a delay, and anything that kind of stops getting to the kind of the decision and getting to the action, and impatient with all this talk festy stuff. Okay, so unhelpful behaviour. But if the group hasn't worked it through as a group, then it's not the group's thinking, it's not the group's decision, it's one person's decision, and it can be fuzzy. It certainly won't have commitment, it won't have agreement behind it. And so, your role as facilitator is to actually help the group work their way towards an agreed, clear decision. The actions, the next steps, and so on. And so, keep pushing as required. What is our decision? What actually have we decided? How are we going to say that? What is what set of words will hold that? What picture will hold that for us? What are our next steps? The classic who, what, when, where, why types of things. Another aspect might be, well, okay, we've done all this work. How would you describe that work? What's the benefit of that for us now as we stand now? That type of thing. Okay, so again, a real gallop. So what I want to do now again is to use the same small groups, but this time we might just have 2. I think KJ said that some people weren't actually responding in his small group, but so we'll see how we go. But so 2 questions here. Again, from everything that we've heard so far, so both all the way from the beginning, from the welcome to now, what happens if a group spends too much time in a given dynamic, gets stuck there? What happens if that happens? And conversely, what happens if a dynamic is omitted, or if you skip that area? So I'm going to have to, sorry, Craig, I'm tossing you in here, but so again, small groups, 7 minutes. What happens if we spend too much time on a dynamic, and what happens if it's omitted?
You're on mute, David. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, righty. So we're kind of coming up against our time limit here, aren't we, for the evening? So it's now 8 o'clock. So what about if we just go just a couple of examples from group 1 and also from group 2 around some examples of what happens if something's done to excess, if you spend too long on a dynamic, an example or two about what happens if a dynamic is skipped or omitted.
I'm happy to go for group 1.
Thanks, Jason.
For us, the excess examples were, for the facilitator, I think, just to pick up the point, I think that Dee mentioned right at the end there, they're not participating in the discussion. They're keeping it on a good path. I think when excess time is spent on one particular dynamic, participants can get bored. There's a level of impatience for those that recognize the value further down the path. So you bring into play the human dynamic of it. And importantly, I think we're there to fulfill a purpose which has some value attached to it. So I think by spending too much time in those areas, wherever they may be, you're not fulfilling the overall outcome that the group's there for. So I think that that's probably first critical for me. The omitting any one thing, again, I think it's a similar point around derailing the value and purpose of being there. I think in totality, they're all important and fulfill the value that the group is looking to achieve. In a practical sense, if it's a decision type exercise where the group is participating in an options analysis, for example, any omission around that divergence element, for example, or options may not be considered as part of that exercise. So, there's that as a possible outcome as well.
Thanks, Jason. Other group.
Cool. So from our group, we'll second what Jason said. So just to add to that, what we felt in our group is that on the excess side, that if you spend too much time on any phase, then you're not going to achieve the objective that you need for the meeting, because what happens is that you run out of time. So you end up with 30 seconds at the end to do actions or something, and you end up not achieving that. So either not achieving what you need to in the meeting because you can't go through all the phases, or alternatively that you need to rush some of the phases, in which case they don't deliver the value that you need. On the omission example is if you skip a step, then you aren't able to, that there might be a feeling that somebody's hijacked the meeting, for example, but what the facilitator is doing is that they are speaking on behalf of the group without really understanding what the group wants. And it becomes an individual, almost command and control type structure where it's like, well, we just do it the way that they said, instead of going through that stage of collectively getting to that objective. I think one thing that Magnus came up with that was really good also is saying that if you time box each of the different stages with some plus or minus tolerance, then you're able to manage the outcome so that you can make sure you get through all of the phases that you need to in good time in the meeting. So that was the other part. So Magnus and Young, were there any points that I missed from the discussion that you felt were worth raising?
I think you've really echoed the part about what was mentioned about the human side of how people would react to the situation when things don't seem to be going as expected, and other things are being rushed through or omitted.
Cool. All right, that's our side. Thanks,
Okay.
David.
Thank you all. So I just want to do a time check here. It's now 8:05, and my pre-time boxed schedule had me doing other stuff around now. So is it okay to take a bit longer, or should I just cut to the chase in the very end?
How much time do you need, David, if you had to go through the normal?
Oh, well, if it was in a perfect world, it'd be another 15 minutes.
Okay, so perhaps by show of hands with thumbs ups or thumbs, I don't know if there's a thumbs down option, but maybe just the thumbs up one to say who is who's able to stay for the 15 minutes.
You're looking for actual thumbs up or thumbs down? Ah, right. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
I've only got about 5 minutes left. I do have something at 8:15.
Cool.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Well, if people need to drop off, I think that's fine. But it looks like we've got enough thumbs up to
keep going.
Keep going for the 15.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. So whole group. So open to all. So again, why is this important? So from the stuff that I've said, from the stuff that you've talked about in your small groups, you've heard report back from the other groups. So from all of that we've talked about so far, what difference would this make for you in your work?
So you're wanting a
Anybody?
conversation?
This is open slather. Yeah, open slather. In turn.
Well, for me, I had maybe a question that others may have also.
Sure.
I guess past experience, there's two questions, maybe they're similar. Past experience is people, certainly in my area of projects and long distance engineering, jumping to solution mode. You know, we understand the problem. Why are we spending time diverging and, you know, looking at a wide range of possibilities when, hey, I'm the expert, or this group is all knowing. Can't we just get to the end and move on and take an action to move forward? So that was one of the questions I had. The other one was managing decisions in a room of stakeholders that have varying levels of, I'll call it, power and authority across an organization is always tricky, especially when the CEO in the room, past experience, has a strong and very detailed focus on needing to understand an issue, and sometimes that's taken as the decision made if she's participated, or he or she has participated in those discussions. So not really observations, but in asking these questions here, how will it make a difference? I'm curious to know how to avoid jumping forward when those participants have a strong feeling to, and also that power and authority differential in the room when making decisions or having discussions around options analysis and decisions is something I found challenging in the past.
Okay, I'll treat them as questions on notice, and I do have some clues there for folks, but I guess check for other people. Thinking about the dynamics and the framework as a whole, what difference would this make for you?
So just to structure the discussion more concretely.
If Magnus was answering, he'd also say, time box it, time box it, time box it. Other folks?
I think it gives it does give a lot more structure. It helps you sort of set your direction a lot more clearly as well, so that you don't tend to drift, because even as a facilitator, I still drift. So it's a useful, it is very useful to have a tool that, you can keep yourself on track with, never mind anybody else, but keep yourself on track with, to keep the process and the procedure moving forward.
And Dee put a point in the chat as well to say, be more cognizant of where you are in the structure. So I think that's a really important one as well, is that knowing that you're going through those different phases, you can say, right, okay, we're in this phase now.
Yeah. Anyone else?
You know, I could see this actually as a really useful tool, David, for, you know, a lot of junior people coming through the ranks that
Yeah.
don't have that experience, that need to learn that experience, and even senior people. You know, you just look at our politicians, half of them, you sit in front of the camera, they can't string a sentence together. You know, and you see that in the workplace a huge amount. I see it when I'm taking people through courses, and, you know, day one, they've got to stand up and do a presentation, and they really are a little bit all over the place. So these kind of frameworks will really help them, you know, to build that skill set, and it is a valuable skill set to have.
Thanks, Kerry. One of the things is, yeah, it's good for not necessarily totally new people, but people who've got some experience under their belt to a greater or lesser extent. And if really experienced people who find what they do works, they say, okay, that's why what I do works. Now I understand a bit more. So I'll just flip back to Jason's couple of questions very quickly.
Sorry, David, just before you do, Young has put a comment in the chat as well.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
When the agenda circulated communicates inclusiveness, it can build on the goodwill among participants. So that's a key point that we had in our breakout. That's really, really useful as well, because I think Magnus also raised, there's a trust aspect to it.
Yeah.
So you build trust when people get together and they have a common objective and they're working through the problem as a collective.
Yeah. Excellent. So the dynamics of the dynamics and different meetings require different emphases. So if indeed it's if people are familiar with the Cynefin framework, you've got kind of simple and complicated, complex and chaotic situations. When everything's simple or even kind of slightly complicated, and so expertise applies perfectly. You can say, here's the problem, here's what we do. You don't really need a meeting. You don't need facilitation. So you can but when it is kind of really complex or chaotic, and you do have to get people have to do some serious skull sweat together, that's when that type of situation applies. When the CEO is in the room, if the CEO needs a lot of explaining of stuff, maybe that's better done offline in a different situation. I did some work a long time ago in the Philippines where in a whole group situation, speaking up was a career-threatening move when the boss was in the room. And so the way I had to deal with that was just get people together at level. So, managers and stuff, and then staff, stuff like that. So, power balances, power imbalances, they're real bastards to deal with and stuff. So that's just the way life is. And finding ways to actually work with people in different situations is what you have to do. No magic silver bullets for that one, I'm afraid. Okay, I might just bounce over situations, and I already said before that you can use this framework of the dynamics. For webinars, you can use it for 2-minute conversations. You can use it for a whole range of different things. So one framework, many different uses. Okay. So summary and closing. I have this new little 4-part conversation structured by questions planned, and I'll kind of not worry too much about that, except that you've got 4 dynamics here, 5 if you include the summary as a given. So you've got all 5 dynamics here structured as a set of 4 basic areas of question. Okay. So I'll just ask either, if people want to answer either of the last 2 questions in 10 words or less, how would you summarize this? And or, thinking back to your one weird trick, where would you put this in the framework? Again, anybody, please.
You have to go.
Go, Jason.
Guys. Thank you. No, I'm not putting out. I have to disconnect.
Done.
So, yeah.
Righty. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much, David.
Cheers, Jason.
Yeah. So, anybody else? Kerry.
Oh, I was waving goodbye to Jason, but anyway,
okay.
I will go. I'll go first. You can tell I'm an extrovert, can't you? So my one weird trick, definitely, well, one of them at any rate, metaphors. I use metaphors in opening as a bit of an icebreaker. Get people to describe themselves using a metaphor. I love it. It's also actually part of what I teach is metaphors and using metaphors to describe things. So it's great. It's an icebreaker, particularly when we're discussing organizations and getting people to describe their organization using a metaphor. They love that one. So that's typically in opening, but it can also be in emergence as well. It is a useful trick to use to get people, to open up a bit. My party trick is actually reading people.
Thanks, Dee. See ya.
So that's my party trick.
All right.
My party trick is actually reading people. I do this little party trick. Normally it's after lunchtime on day 3 when people are wilting, and I sort of like I will pick out the introverts, the extroverts, who's the morning person, the afternoon person, the night owl, and yeah. So it's just a party trick, and that's regardless of who they are in the meeting, and in the workshops. And it just really is, again, it's just a way to pep them up. And just create that, oh yeah, I can see why I'm tired at the moment, because I'm really, really not an afternoon person.
Cool. Thanks. Anyone else?
So the weird trick that I selected earlier was the pre-mortem, and it fits across the whole flow, because what it is it puts one in a mindset to say that you've been a time machine, you've transported yourself to the end date when you were supposed to deliver the thing, and it's all gone horribly wrong. So then what you do is you sit and say, what could we have done to have avoided that situation? And then what it does, because you're in that mindset, what it means that you then put down all the actions that you could have done, and then you go, but hang on a sec, is that the thing is only 6 months away or whatever it is, so those things haven't happened, so hey, we can do all these actions. And so it's really just putting people into that frame of mind where they can live through the thing not having been delivered, and then they can put in the actions in order to resolve that. So it goes through all of the phases, where what you would do is that you start by framing what the objective is that you want to achieve at the end of the period. You then say the divergence bit is all of the things that has gone wrong, in inverted commas, and then the bit around the emergence is really working through those to say, well, what types of actions can one put next to each of those, and what sort of value would they have. Your convergence part would be to then select out of those which ones are really valuable and things that are sufficiently low cost that you can do. And then the closing is just to sort of firm up on who's going to do what, and then you close the meeting on that basis. So for me, I think it's quite good because of the mindset that it puts you in.
Cool.
So Young has put a comment in the chat as well on the 10 words, saying, we'll hear from each of you. Together we'll find a path forward. The whole line is the opening, part 1 for the divergence, part 2 for convergence. Not enough words.
Thanks, Young.
Yeah, it's a good way of summarizing.
Alrighty. Weekend beckons. Go,
Cheers,
Patrick.
Patrick.
Alrighty. So I'm not my last. So thank you to everyone. Just want to mention, just put the slide up and just say there is training available if people want to think about that. Give me a call if you're interested. And then finally, thanks to everyone for your sharing, for your dialogue, and being here tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, David. It's been a while since we've done a session on some of the practical aspects of what we do, like facilitation. So it was really quite nice to be able to do it. Have a look at your framework, and I think everyone walked out with something that they can make use of. So thank you so much for doing that for us.
Pleasure. It's been a really interesting exercise pulling it together. I'll stop sharing now.
No, I love your graphics as well that you've got. They're really colourful. So I think what we can do now is we can have a bit of a discussion period for a couple of minutes if people have got time. And then, so I think we've lost some of the people that had some of the questions that were raised a bit earlier that we were going to come back to. But I think there's still probably a couple of things we can chat about in the next few minutes.
So I tackled Jason's couple of questions, so that part's okay. If there's other questions, we can either from other people or from whatever, happy to go there.
So I thought the really interesting one that was raised was the question around the disparity of level. That if you have somebody in the meeting who's got a very quite a high level, so if you have, say, a CEO walking into a room and everyone else is quite junior, and the CEO is sort of going through and saying, sort of pushing it through the different stages faster than the stages should go. As a facilitator, what should you do to achieve a good outcome in that meeting?
These things just go through my mind.
So part of it is in the framing, in the discovery phase, the framing to say, so, this is the way the facilitation that I run works. So expectations on all participants are, including you. Do you agree to that? So you frame their role before the meeting starts, before the session starts, and then I tend to use a lot of the sticky note card storming stuff, and so then my response is often, "That's really interesting. Write me another card." So actually, so treat them like everyone else. They write the card, and then so on. And then the third one is, that's really interesting. And then you walk over to your flip chart or your sticky wall or whatever and say, so you're saying this again. Is there anything else that you want to say here? So rather than, because often CEOs tend to repeat themselves because they want to really push an idea. He's like, hang on, that's been said. Anything different to add? Those are 3 things for me.
Okay. So I had one thought on that from my side. Things that I've used in the past that have worked for me in that situation is that when you have a disparity like that, then asking the right questions can open up the the debates. In other words, to say that it's maybe not as clear
Yes.
cut as the executive might have believed when they walked in. Because you wouldn't be having the meeting if it was something that was really clear. It was really simple what the answer is to sort of say, well, okay, hang on a second. In what you've said over there, you've mentioned that we're expecting to get 100,000 calls next month in that particular service that's coming through. So are there, do we know whether the network is able to handle that volume? And then it's a question of saying, you know, so it can be a little bit closed in that sense, or I suppose to then direct the conversation, say, okay, if we don't know, then do we need to establish that? And then that creates some divergence, because now we have to go back and say, well, we can't take that as a foregone conclusion because there's still some questions that need to be answered. So that's the approach that I've normally used when you have somebody with power trying to move the meeting on too quickly.
Yeah, it's really good.
Because I haven't really found it effective too much in my experience with telling executives, CEOs to, you know, shut up and sit down.
Yeah, it's the child mentality, I find, is, you know, and I say to people, you learn, if you're a parent, you learn how to say no in different tones.
Mhm.
And that's the same tone that you apply to dealing with those senior management at executive level, particularly, is you learn to say no in different tones.
Yeah.
And potentially longer sentences as well.
Yes.
It still equates to the same thing. You're still saying no.
Yeah.
You know,
But
it's the person's turn.
But you're saying no in a way that says, I'm doing this to help you achieve your objective better. But it's still no, like you say.
Yeah, it's still no. Yeah, I also find using a risk-based approach. So when you do get those senior managers constantly pushing through, one of the tactics that I use, and it is a tactic, is to promote that conversation by asking, what is the risk associated with heading in that direction? Because really they actually do want to know what risks are associated with their ideas. And I find that, you know, that helps junior people in the organization actually relate, you know, their experiences into the requirements as well. It's like, you know, the people this week, that's all I got from them for the first couple of days was, you know, we have these senior VPs coming in, they're asking for this new stuff. We've delivered stuff, but they haven't, you know, and this is, oh yeah, I want this now as well. You know, like, how do we cope with it? Because they don't know how to actually push back and say no.
Yeah. So I think it's getting on to 8:30, so it's probably a good time to call it. So I just wanted to thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and looking forward to seeing you people at the next event.
Me too.
Yeah, thank you, David and Craig. That change of the manifesto from working software to working solutions.
So the manifesto is locked in proprietary. The authors locked it in 2001, and it was always meant to be a document that was in a point in time. So you'll never see that manifesto updated. And the authors have said it's now time. If the community wants to write a new manifesto, then knock themselves out. But I can't see that ever happening because nobody would ever agree.
Well, I'll say that Agile Business Consortium, so you know that they've got their Scrum courses that they built over the last few years. That's one thing that they did actually do, was they actually put a cross through the software and said working solutions, because that's our focus. Our focus in that world is not software. Our focus is the entire solution from end to end.
Yeah. And most people do that. I do that as well in my classes, and even the authors themselves have said that, you know, that they said it. I remember being at the 10th anniversary when they were celebrating that, and 15 of the 17 authors said they wish they hadn't written the word software in there. So I think it's just become par for the course. But unfortunately, rightly or wrongly, the original is locked in stone, and
Well, I would like to say that I'd join you all in, where was it, Nebraska or Nevada? Can't remember which.
Nashville.
Nashville, that's the one. Started with an N. I was close. I would say that I'll join you there, but I won't be. My holiday to Bali got cancelled. So Jetstar are not flying even to Bali, so I probably won't be getting to Nashville either. Bring me back some cowboy boots though.
Well, we'll see if I even get there at this point, but yeah.
And thank you, John, for having a great event again.
For the dad joke. No, thanks, Kerry, for joining us and also for your insights as well.
Have a lovely evening.